Welcome in the latest episode of the Five on the Floor podcast on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Make sure to check in 5reasonsports.com, F-I-V-E, reasonsports.com for all of the latest episodes of 5 on the Floor, but also 3 yards per carry, light skinned opinions, 5 rings, Kane, Shula Bowl podcast, and more. Also, check out our YouTube channel on there. Actually, Alex Toledo and I just put a YouTube exclusive episode up, so make sure that you check that out about the NBA's return. And check out my last episode with Sam Amick of The Athletic, national NBA writer for The Athletic, breaking down the NBA at large. We're going to target the Heat a little bit more in this episode. And also our merchandise, not just the Tua shirts, but also all of the Heat shirts, BAM VP, our Bucket Brothers t-shirt with Jimmy and Tyler Hero, and more is on the website, 5reasonsports.com, and it costs you nothing to click. Also, check out all the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. I talk about this sponsor quite a bit. He's a big Miami Heat fan, big Miami sports fan in general. He's based up in Palm Beach County, but he can work with you even if you're down in Dade or Broward. And that is Dr. Jonathan Chung. That's of Keystone Chiropractic and Neuroplasticity. You know, we're in an age where you can do pretty much everything by telemedicine, and he can do that for you. He can give you a 15-minute consultation for free if you mention 5 Reasons. You know, a lot of chiropractors and therapists want to see you 3 times a week for months, but Keystone has a treatment philosophy of doing just enough to get you back to a normal life again. They have great results with post-concussion syndrome, dizziness and vertigo, headaches, and chronic neck and back pain. They're focused on low-force spinal adjustments and brain-based rehabilitation. Again, like I mentioned, they're offering virtual rehab visits using video conferencing to assess and prescribe effective treatment protocols during the COVID-19 outbreak, because research shows that patients who get that supervised telemedicine rehab program can be just as effectively treated as an in-person visit for many pain conditions. Like I said, mention 5 Reasons, 15-minute video or phone consultation, and I should have mentioned this, save 50% off your first virtual rehab session. The website is chiropractickeystone.com. Again, that's chiropractickeystone.com. The social media account is at Dr. Jonathan Chung. And now, today's episode.
Welcome to 5 on the Floor, a Miami Heat and NBA podcast from Ethan Skolnick with Alphonse Sidney, a.k.a. Alf954. Brought to you by the 5 Reasons Sports Network.
All right, Ethan Skolnick back on the 5 on the Floor podcast. We've got the full crew here tonight. We've got Alphonse Sidney. We got Alex Toledo. Because there was big news in the NBA today as we're recording this. Already put out an episode, like I mentioned. Check it out with Sam Amick. Goes through all the details of what this plan is, the 22-team plan, how it affects all the teams around the NBA, some of the teams that he thinks will benefit from this. I mentioned the Los Angeles Clippers. We also talked about the teams that won't benefit, like the Utah Jazz, who lost Bogdanovich for the season with basically elective surgery, and some of the other ones, Philadelphia, Indiana, who've gotten healthier. We're going to focus just on the Heat in this pod. We're a Heat podcast, and we're going to get back to that. So let's get to this. First, Alf, your reaction, and I know there's bigger things going on in the world. You and I talked about that in another podcast, which people should check out. But just from an NBA perspective, your reaction to the NBA's plan, do you like it? Do you like where the Heat sit in it?
I think it's too many regular season games. I don't think they really need 8 to hash this out, but I understand they're going for the most revenue possible, and they're trying to include as many teams as possible to make it fair. But I think 8 is just too many regular season games. But besides that, I guess it's fine. It's kind of what we've expected, except we were thinking more of 3 or 4 regular season games to get everybody to the same number. I don't know exactly how that's going to work now that not everyone's going to be at the same number of games, but right. I'm sure they're going to hash all that out. So that's fine. But overall, I mean, this is what we thought was going to happen. So I'm not really even surprised by it. Some of the smaller machinations of like who they're going to play, stuff like that. This stuff about home court advantage, that stuff is still getting worked out, and I guess some of it seems silly, some of it just seems stupid. But for the most part, the structure of what they're trying to do is something that we've been calling for the last month and a half.
Yeah, we've been calling it, and of course, our friend Keith Smith has been calling the whole Orlando thing. If they play the 8 regular season games, which what they appear they're going to do, Alex, these teams will get to 72 to 75 games, essentially. I think the Heat are at 66 right now, so they would basically get to 74 games. We're going to talk about the Heat schedule and the difficulties of it because the bad teams have been wiped out for the most part, and the Heat had a lot of those bad teams in the Eastern Conference that they were supposed to play the rest of the year. But just looking at it, 8 regular season games. Do you think that's enough? Too much? To get a team where because the Heat are going to make the playoffs, they're going to be somewhere between the 3 and the 6 seed. They can't really move all the way up to 2 to get Toronto. They're too far back. They won't fall all the way to 7. They're going to be somewhere between 3 and 6. The East and the West are staying the same, so there's not going to be any bleeding over in the conferences. There are 4 different teams that the Heat could play in the first round. Still most likely to be Philadelphia or Indianapolis, but it also could be Boston or Toronto. Is 8 about the right number for you think for this Heat team to get back where it needs to be, Alex?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's definitely more than enough. That's more than a preseason. They were already in the middle of the season, whereas, I mean, it's basically been about the size of an off season almost that they've already missed. But at the same time, like, this never got resolved. They're going to be motivated, I think. I'm not really worried about the Heat players as far as this return. I think 8 is going to be a great sample for all the NBA teams, especially because, these convoluted play-in tournament rules. You got to have a good enough sample. I think, if anything, this is more than enough. I thought 5 games was good. But for everything I've already said, right, the money incentive thing that, to me, just overpowers everything else. It's like there was so much money on the line, and they're, like Alf said, they're going to go for as much as they can and as much as everybody is willing to agree to. And that's why they included 22 teams and not 16 or 20. And, yeah.
And looking at it, 22 teams, but just, again, to go over it for people who don't quite understand it, 8 regular season games. They will play it out as if they're playing for seeding. They're taking 1 extra team from the East and 5 from the West. The reason they did that is because the 5 teams in the West that are not in the playoffs right now in the Western Conference all have a better record than the 1 team that's closest to the playoffs in the East, which is Washington. So to take those 5 teams, they had to take 1 from the East. Charlotte does not make it. Got 5 teams in the West. Essentially, the way that this is going to work is that they play out these games. If the 8 seed in either conference is 4 games clear, more than 4 games clear, of the 9 seed, there's no play-in in that conference. But if it's less than, if it's 4 games or less, 4 games or fewer, then there will be a play-in game. And the way that works is that the 8 seed in that scenario at that time would have to be beaten twice, so double elimination, whereas the 9 seed would be eliminated with 1 loss. Does everybody understand that? It took Alex and I about 30 minutes.
Oh, my God, yeah. I'm so glad that we hashed this out earlier in the day because this would be such a clunky podcast that we waited till right now for me to understand. I was bewildered by those. I didn't understand it. But essentially, like, the best way to explain it is just that they start 1-0, and that's not exactly what they're doing. But, yeah, right. The 9 seed has to – the burden is, to use, like, law terms for some reason, the burden is on the 9 seed. They have to – like, the Wizards, for example, I'm looking at it right now. They're down 5.5 games behind Orlando.
Right.
And 6 behind Brooklyn. So the burden is on them to win way more games than both of those teams just to get into the play-in tournament. And then the trade-off for the West. Too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there, and once you get to the play-in tournament, you got the 9 seed has to win 2 games, whereas the 8 seed takes it home, which is 1 win. And then on the West side, it's even like, they're closer to the 8 seed than Washington is. And it's funny that they used 4 games, right? Because the Pelicans are 3.5 games behind the Grizzlies.
Yeah, it's funny how that worked out.
That is, to be fair, that is the same for the Blazers and the Kings and almost the Spurs. But at the same time, it's going to be the onus is on them just to get to the 9th seed, where they then get the gift of having to win 2 times while the opponent can win in 1 game.
Yeah, but
they basically have to go play 2 game 7s.
Well, and then once you do it, then you play the number 1 seed in the conference. So you're gonna have to. Oh
my God!
You're gonna have to chase down. So they have created some. They have rewarded the better teams in some way already, because
True.
You have to chase down the 8 seed just to get within the 4 games. Then you have to beat them twice, and then you get the Lakers. I mean, that's essentially how this goes. So that is an advantage for the Lakers. We're going to talk about the seeding stuff.
What do you think the Bucks are going to do to the Wizards?
Well, right, but we'll see what Bradley Beal does. All right, let's get to the Heat's 8 games though, because this is the way that Ira has it. And essentially, so you understand, this is from Vincent, our buddy Vinny's tweet, Vincent Goodwill. Follow him at Vince Goodwill on Twitter. The plan is for teams to continue their schedule as planned with the next 8 games. If a team is scheduled to play the Hawks, Bulls, or Pistons, or any of the other teams that are out, like the Cavs, the Knicks, the Warriors, or the teams that are out of the playoffs right now, it moves on, or the Wolves, it moves on to the next game on the schedule. Okay? And as I mentioned, the Heat had a bunch of garbage left at the end of the season. We were all talked about that the whole year, that they were going to be able to clean up late, right? Okay, here's their next 8 games according to this format. Bucks, Pacers, Thunder, Nuggets, Suns, Celtics, Pacers, Celtics. Alf, what do you think of that?
Light work for the Heat. No, it's daunting when you look at it, but I mean, the Heat were losing to a lot of bad teams anyway.
Yeah.
And they seem to get up for the better teams. So I don't even know if this is a bad thing, because, you know, there were a lot of bad losses towards the end of that season, end of the season before it was suspended. So maybe a gauntlet before the playoffs is exactly what this team needs to get, I don't know, remotivated or focused, especially that, you know, now that they're healthy. A nice gauntlet, playing the Bucks, playing the Pacers, Thunder, you know, some of these teams, it might actually be good for them. I'm looking at it from a fan's perspective as a positive thing. I'm trying to, because otherwise it's scary as hell.
Well, it is. I mean, the only so quote unquote soft team on there is the Suns. I mean, that's it. I mean, of the 6 playing teams,
and the Sixers.
Well, they don't play the Sixers.
Gotta back off.
No, but they don't play the Sixers though. They don't get the Sixers. Bucks, Pacers, Thunder, Nuggets, Suns, Celtics, Pacers, Celtics. So they weren't going to play the Sixers again, because they played the 4 games against the Sixers in the regular season. Remember, they went 3-1.
They have winning records against all those teams except for the Celtics, right? Except
for the Celtics. So, they beat. It's so long ago. Yeah, they have a winning record against the Bucks. Are they 1-1 against the Pacers?
No, I think they beat them twice.
They beat them twice. Thunder.
As I remember it, the Boston, the Celtics were the only team that had the matchup advantage versus the Heat. And me and you were talking about that on the phone, that this might change some of that. It won't change it with the Sixers, right? The tiebreaker thing. But what will change, like you mentioned earlier in the pod, is that the seeding, right? Like they might not play the Pacers anymore. It seems like the 2 most likely scenarios are Philly and Indiana. But then at the same time, like you've got Toronto slicing in as like a kind of a long shot that it might not happen, but it could still happen.
Well, it would only be
down
Toronto,
to 3, then he can move down to 6.
Right, that would be the only way. Toronto has to slip to 3, basically behind Boston, and Miami has to slip to 6, which is, I mean, both are possible. It's least likely. It could be Boston. Boston slips down, stays in the 3. Miami slips to 6. Boston could even be the 4, potentially. Unlikely.
And they get Boston in the regular season schedule, right?
They get Boston. Yes, they get Boston twice 2 of the last 3.
Oh, I saw somebody report the Celtics schedule, and they only put the Heat once. So they play them twice.
I think there's some confusion because, again, there's some inconsistencies because, remember, the teams you were supposed
say
to
that they got to play them twice because they still had to play the Celtics twice before the season got shut down.
Yeah, but it does. But, again, think of it this way. The Celtics, the teams that crop up on the Celtics schedule, there may be fewer games that they're skipping because some of those teams are in, and so maybe they get to that Heat game 9th instead of 8th. And so that's why Vinny is saying that there's going to have to be – this is not definite because there's going to be some inconsistencies because some teams have some of that crap still on their schedule and some didn't. And so it's a little bit hard to kind of put it together. I would not assume – I would not assume that those last 2 games, right now, again, Bucks, Pacers, Thunder, Nuggets, Suns, Celtics, I would expect probably that the Heat would play those 6. Those last 2, the Pacers and Celtics, I wouldn't guarantee those because I don't know what Indiana's schedule looks like, and maybe they already get to 8 or Celtics. Well, the Suns is the 5th game on the Heat schedule, so I would expect they probably get to that one. But the last 2, they may not. They may end up being substituted with somebody else.
So let's say both of those teams reach the limit before the Heat gets to them, right? Do they then just skip those 2 games as well? Like, are there other playoff teams past those games for the Heat?
I would have to look. I think those were
Let me see. I'll look it up.
But even if there's not, what I was told, and this was what was reported today, was that then they would find, 2 teams that still have two games to play. So
they would be like the two kids in class who don't have a partner. You got to put them together.
That's exactly right. Like they're in the prom, right? They're in the back, and all of a sudden you've got the Heat and the Spurs or Wallflowers in the back, and you're going to match them up. Well, I think we all have. I'm not going to speak for Alf, but that's but yeah. I mean, that's all sort of variable. But I do think
Toronto, by the way. I just looked it up, and after
Toronto's supposed to be the last game of the season, so it could be
that's
them.
That's the only one left. It's the last game of the season. It's the only playoff opponent after that Celtics game. If they were to reach, if both teams were to reach the limit, I guess they would get Toronto one more time.
Yeah, it could be them. So I would not look at those last two games against the Pacers and Celtics as definite. I think the first six probably are. All right, but let's get to the next part of this, and then we'll get to some league stuff after it. I said today, and we've talked about this a little on the pod, but I said on the AMIC pod that I think that the Heat are maybe didn't benefit the most from this, but I think you would put them into the category of having benefited overall. When you look on the ledger and you say, one, they weren't that healthy at the time of the stoppage. Myers was not back. Hero was working his way back in. Two, they weren't playing well. I mean, the last game of the season, I know it was weird circumstances, but I mean, it was pretty emblematic of the way that they were playing over a 2 to 3 week period. They were still integrating new players. So I think in some ways it's good. I think that the way that they're hurt, I would still put them in the category of this being an overall positive for them, but the home road thing for them, I mean, they were headed for a home court seed, and the Sixers and the Heat had the most, striking home road splits in the entire league. And so I think in that way it doesn't benefit them. I'll start with this. Do you guys agree that overall it's positive for them? And second, let's do this one quickly because we've done it before. Do we all agree that the Celtics of those four teams are the one team you don't want to play if everybody's healthy?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the regular season matchup, they don't match up very well because the Heat are a small team on the perimeter, and you have some big guys out there for the Celtics. And when you're trying to guard them with Goran Dragic and Kendrick Nunn and Tyler Hero, it presents a lot of issues. But the Celtics might be the biggest reason they added guys like Iggy and Jay Crowder, guys that actually could match up physically with some of those guys. So we haven't really seen this version of the Heat match up with the Celtics. But just based on what we saw throughout the season, yeah, the Celtics are the toughest matchup. And whether this is beneficial or not, man, it's just so hard to say. Just because the world is upside down right now. There's going to be teams coming back in with players that have been gone all season. Some guys are going to be out of shape. Who knows, really how this is going to benefit them. On paper, the Heat had a soft schedule going into the playoffs with a lot of home games. But we saw the last home game of the season. We saw the last few weeks of the season. That wasn't necessarily a plus. So like I said, I mean, it's just completely up in the air. Who knows what's going to happen? But overall, just looking at the fact that Myers and Tyler are going to be back healthy, Jimmy's had a bunch of time off. I think Jimmy is going to benefit the most of anybody on the entire team because of the time off. So really, like I said, it's up in the air. But I mean, I have a good feeling about the team going into this stretch.
If Jimmy comes to this camp the way he came to the last camp in that kind of shape, they're in really good shape overall. And I think that's a real benefit for them. But, I mean, looking at Alex, let me throw this at you, and then after the break, we're going to get to some league stuff. The 8 teams in the Eastern Conference, where do you put the Heat, and who's with them in terms of franchises you trust to have handled this stoppage the right way and for their players to have handled it the right way?
Oof, that's a tough question. I was ready to answer the other one that he threw it out, but I think off the top of my head, I would think Toronto. I think they've just had a great reputation the past few years for the way that their guys train and getting the most out of their guys. I mean, I would tend to trust Boston too, just because of how good their chemistry was this year. Like, I definitely would not have trusted that last year's Celtics to try to play under these circumstances. They would have blown up in the first game. I don't trust Philly because of their chemistry issues, but at the same time, like, what if that space that they just got right now is what they needed, and they're just going to be back to like, yeah, we're just going to play some basketball. We had some space away from each other, and it just ends up helping them out. Like, I don't think that's impossible. we'll see though, because they were on the verge of blowing up before the season blew up.
Mhm.
And but off the top of my head, Toronto and Boston, right? I mean, even then, like I kind of trust Indiana too. They've been just a solid organization for as long as they're always a playoff team for the most part. They also get a lot out of their guys. Like Brogdon was looking like an all-star candidate. Sabonis was an all-star.
Mm-hmm.
Miles Turner's Defensive Player of the Year candidate. And at the same time, I agree with you that it's mostly positive for the Heat, but the worst part about it is that they have to face these teams that are coming back from injuries and are going to be extremely healthy now. So I think the gap has been closed between Boston being the worst matchup and these other teams. Like I think the Sixers and Pacers are going to be harder to play if the Heat do end up playing them. And Boston is going to be the toughest. Toronto's still going to be a tough team to play. Like, it is a positive because they get Hero and Leonard back, but they have to play these teams that are going to be healthier than ever. Toronto had injury problems all season. I just think the gap has closed between Toronto and the rest of these teams. I think it's going to be tough no matter who they play at this point.
I mean, I think you also have to look at the coaches. And as I go down the list of coaches,
True.
Toronto's got a pretty good coach. Miami's got a pretty good coach. Boston's got a pretty good coach. Milwaukee's got a pretty good coach. Indiana, I think he's proven he's a pretty good coach. Philadelphia, I don't know. The Nets don't have a coach, right? I mean, who is the coach? I don't even know who replaced Atkinson. I can't even remember. I mean, he'll be coaching. He should be coaching the Knicks next year, but I think they're going for Thibodeau.
Jack Vaughn.
Jacques Vaughn's their coach now. Okay.
Jacques Vaughn, yeah. Sorry.
Okay.
I think so.
And then Orlando Clifford's got a pretty good coach. He doesn't have enough to work with. Anyway, after the break, I want to get into the NBA stuff. We're going to do that quickly. I want to tell you about one of the great sponsors of the 5 Reasons Sports Network. We've got a lot of great sponsors, all local, but one of them, it really stands out for these times, which is Making America Clean Again. It's macainc.net, M-A-C-A Inc.net, which is a division of Greenview Construction that specializes in cleanup of contaminated areas. Of course, we're coming through COVID. You definitely need this. Your business, your residents, you want the people inside to be safe, and you want people to feel comfortable coming into that business. They can service a wide range of residential and commercial projects, and members of the company are certified and trained in all aspects of their services. They've got a 3-step cleaning process, and you'll get a certificate that you can put up there and make everybody feel safe. They clean and sanitize, then they disinfect, and then they sterilize. Again, it's macainc.net. That's macainc.net. Don't take a chance. Don't make people feel uneasy as they're coming into your building. Get that certificate, macainc.net. We've posted some of the stuff on Twitter. It's pretty amazing, the work that they do. They do it efficiently. They do it within your budget. And again, Chris Tyson is a big Miami sports fan too. So as are all of our sponsors, it seems. So check it out, macainc.net. All right, let's get to the NBA and kind of the last part of this plan that I've talked about this a lot, so I'm not gonna hammer it again. I think that they should reseed after the first round, especially if they're just doing East-West. You know, if Orlando beats Milwaukee in the first round, they should still, in my view, have to play whatever the top seed is left. It doesn't look like they're going to do that. Dave McMenamin on ESPN.com today put out a sort of some of the ideas. Alex, I think you sent this to us in the thread. Some of the ideas that they're talking about, and I think they're all stupid. To try to reward the teams that ended up with higher seeds. I'm trying to find it right now. Here it is. Okay, I'll go through to this, and you guys just tell me top of your head if you like this idea or not. Alf. The higher seeded team gets possession to start the second, third, and fourth quarters. Up or down?
What is this, football? No, it's stupid.
Alex, the higher seeded team designates one player to be allowed 7 fouls before fouling out. This is the way for Hassan to say in the game, I guess. For Portland.
Oh wow, I was gonna go straight to UD. I was gonna say UD's gonna get some playing time in the playoffs.
He might.
He's gonna be in shape.
He might against Philadelphia. Damn straight.
Oh my God.
UD looks good right now. All right,
don't
Alf,
give UD 7 fouls, Adam Silver.
Alf, the higher seeded team receives 1 extra coach's challenge.
No, stupid. No. Like, do you want to slow these games down even more?
Well, that's what I said. Alex, the higher seeded team transports actual hardwood home court to Orlando.
Yes.
Vice colors.
Yes.
The vice.
This was my favorite one. Easily.
We don't think that's a good idea here on the pod because the Heat don't play well on the vice court, right? Remember?
No, but they can get their own home court.
Do they think this is the 80s with the Celtics parquet floor? And
this is like ABA. This is ABA stuff they're talking about. This is
Listen,
ABA
man, it makes a
stuff.
difference. It makes a difference.
All right, how about this one, Alf? I love this one. The higher seeded teams get hotel choice priority. So you don't have to be in the sports resort, which has got like Mickey like playing with a wiffle ball bat. Okay, on all that. I've stayed at the sports resort. I guess you get the animation one or whatever. So to me, I thought they were all staying at Coronado, which is the
Nickelodeon hotel.
The Nickelodeon.
That's what I'm thinking. The Nickelodeon hotel with the water parks in the middle.
Right, exactly.
You get to pick like the Fairly Odd Parents room or the Timmy
Listen, man, the
Turner
Zoomers
room.
will go for that. You're gonna have the Grizzlies and the Pelicans there, and they'll be just fine.
Just like fighting over the SpongeBob room.
Over SpongeBob, of course, and
have
Fairly
you guys
Odd
been
Parents.
have we talked about this? I talked about this with Keith. Have you guys been in any of those? Not the Coronado, but some of the other ones. I mean, they're basically half the size of Holiday Inn rooms. I don't know how they're going to cuss. You can't put NBA players in those rooms. Like I've stayed at the sports resort about a year and a half ago. Yeah, it's just not. I mean, and the thing is, they're still working out how they're going to handle. The players. Amick and I talked about this in the pod, but some of the players are concerned about them not allowing people into this particular bubble and all the rest of this. I mean, literally, if they do it at the sports resort or Art of Animation, there's like a cafeteria in the middle where you go get like a 6-day-old, Mickey pancakes with chocolate chips on them, and some old bacon. And some spoiled eggs. Like that's basically what you're going to get in the middle. I'm not speaking as a snob. I stay at these hotels. I've taken my daughter to these hotels.
So essentially, you're agreeing with this measure. You're saying that this hotel choice priority is actually a huge plus for teams.
I will say it's a better idea than changing play on the court. I would not do anything to change play on the court. Okay, and so to me, the simple solution to this is why is it so complicated? Reseed. Let Milwaukee and the Lakers play the worst teams in their conference for as long as they're alive. What is the problem with that?
This is where we disagree. So I've done some thought on this ever since this came out. Like I love these proposals only because they're creative. And you said that you don't want to change the game, but reseeding kind of does change the game. It goes completely against everything that has transpired with the NBA in their history. So that would actually is more fuel for the asterisk crowd. And I agree with you that the asterisk thing is overstated.
But Alex,
I think that is more reason for an asterisk
change the play
reseeding.
on the court. But it doesn't change the play on the court. It just rewards a team that had a good regular season without change. I mean, what are they going to make the hoop 9 feet for one team and 11 feet for the other team? Like this is not. What are they doing?
Listen. I think the game thing is fair, and I get what you're saying. But what if? And listen to me. What if you did like 2 of these, right? And 2 that like don't affect the game, maybe. First of all, I'm going to go all the way for the hardwood home court thing and transporting them. And not only that, not only do I love that idea, I think they should just make it normal, right? You want to make it like the NBA playoffs. You get 4 games, the team with the better record gets 4 games with their courts, and the team with the worst record gets 3 games.
They got to keep switching out the floors.
And you get your DJ too. DJ Irie is there for the home games, and Mike Biamani is there for the home games, and Crazy Andy and Uptown Dale treks up from Las Olas.
Okay, maybe
honestly, that would be the only thing. Like you could do like crowd noise, a DJ, your home team DJ, and your home announcer.
But but the players will see through it, Alf. Like
forget all that though. What if just the courts 4 versus 3, and on top of that, the hotel choice thing? Like I think those 2 things are like good enough, right? Better than nothing.
It's all stupid. Unless you make the road team stay at a Days Inn.
They basically are Days Inns, Alf. They basically are Days Inns. I mean, you could go down the street to the Marriott World Hotel, and it's a far. you stayed at that hotel, right? It's a far nicer hotel than most of those Disney properties there. So yeah, let the better ones stay at the Marriott World. It's let some of the teams come in on helicopter instead of traffic. They're going to come up with all kinds of
I just think that's huge. There should be an asterisk, right? Because I think the teams that are high seeds, like the Lakers or the Clippers, let's say they were to do the hotel choice thing and they still lose, like, oh my God, it would look even worse. It's like, wow, you really had everything.
You're going to see some higher seeds lose just because this is not a normal NBA season. It's just been so disrupted. So you're going to see some higher teams lose. Like,
Like who, though? That's the thing. I kind of agree with the theory, but trying to think of it is, like, tough. I guess somebody in the West.
But there are so many teams in the middle, though. That's the thing. Like, we talk about the high seeds. Okay, there's basically –
So you're talking about 3-6.
Right. In terms of elite teams, I mean, everybody's got about the same record except for the Lakers, the Bucks, and I guess you throw the Clippers in there because they would have had that record if those guys had played together the whole year. I mean,
and then the middle class is strong in the NBA right now.
The middle, the upper middle, right? I mean, you've all those teams in the West, whether it's Houston, OKC, Dallas, all Utah, Denver, and then in the East, Miami, Philadelphia, Indiana, Toronto, Boston. All of those teams are about the same. They're all good, and then there's two crappy teams in the East, and there's probably going to be one, maybe not even one crappy team in the West, because the reality is, any of those teams, New Orleans or Portland, fully healthy, are pretty talented teams.
Yep.
And whether if they beat Memphis out or not, but they're pretty loaded. And although I don't think the Spurs are great, they do have 2 All-Stars on that team and one of the 3 best coaches in NBA history. So I don't.
They still got good players.
Yeah, there's not that big a difference. You're really talking about how to make this fair look, the Clippers load managed during the year, so I don't really feel bad for them. You're really talking about 2 teams. You're talking about the Lakers and the Bucks. And
I mean, Kawhi is going to be unbelievable.
Well, they look at their record when Paul George and Kawhi played together this season. I mean, and they can do this from the jump. So you're really talking about making this fair to the Lakers and Bucks, and it seems like what they've tried to do that is make it almost impossible for the 8 seeds. So I guess that's what they're doing.
Well, isn't it fair for the teams that end up in the 3 and 4 seed too? Because that's where the real fight is, right? In both conferences, the teams going for 3 and 4, that's where the biggest incentive is. Because I think the Lakers, Clippers, and Bucks were never going to lose in the first round unless it was like a best of one, like we saw Orlando beat Toronto in game 1 last year.
Well, let me ask this, and then we'll jump off this. If you know that the Bucks are in the 1 spot, does it benefit the Heat to just fall to 6, get out of that 4-5? Right? If you're not reseeding?
I mean, I think they are going to end up doing a couple of these, maybe 1 or 2 of these little, incentives that we talked about.
Yeah.
So even just for that, I would rather the Heat end up in 3 or 4.
None of those incentives mean anything. I mean,
none of those incentives are as much as avoiding Giannis in the second round. I mean, you're not getting home court in the first round anyway, because there's no such thing. So why not? I mean,
what if they do that 1 extra coach's challenge, though? I think that's valuable in a playoff
Spo
situation.
hates the coach's challenge. He won't use it.
He's going to use it.
Yeah.
He won't use it. He hates it.
Oh, come on.
He hates it. I don't.
That's a card. It's a card. It's not something that he relies on. But if going to that situation, he has it in a. How many times does Spo disagree with calls? If he has it at the end of a game, he has 1 or 2 left.
Wasn't there a time? I can't even remember this season now, but wasn't there a game this season where he could have used it and he didn't? I feel like
there was a bunch of times where
but it's the regular season, though. We're talking about a playoff situation.
He has fundamental political differences with the coach's challenge.
All I'm saying is the other coach has it too, and I don't think he wants to be at a disadvantage.
Maybe
and I know he's going to disagree with calls. That's what he does.
Maybe not. I think the Heat's performance may be based in part on if they let the IG models in. We'll see, because we got to see where Tyler's head is. But some of these things are going to be like
wow.
are going to be really hard to adjust to for these coaches. I just trust this coach more than a lot of the coaches. But as you look at the East playoffs, I mean, I think there's really 6 elite coaches in the East playoffs. I think Steve Clifford's pretty close to an elite coach too. I mean, there's definitely 5. I mean,
that's why I think this is all pretty fair overall. It's like they're all going to have a tough schedule now. They're all going to have to play each other. And it's like, if this is going to be even harder, mentally, because it's so different from every season. They're going to be in a different headspace. I think this is going to prove who the toughest teams are, like we kind of talked about yesterday.
I think there should be no asterisk, because I think this, like you said, this is organizationally. I did communicate with somebody inside the organization the past couple of days who basically said we're going to put everything to the test, and I think that's the way they view it. They think that they believe with good reason that when they have an opportunity to plan and get their players ready, that they can between Bill Ferran and that group, and between Spoelstra and between the leadership of Jimmy Butler and the professionalism of Bam Adebayo and some of the others, they feel, and Pat Riley setting the tone, they feel they are as equipped to handle this as any organization in the NBA, and they have an advantage too. They're down the street from Orlando. It's not a pain in the ass to travel here. It's not I don't know if what they're gonna do about letting teams work in their own facilities, but whatever it is, the Heat have something an advantage because travel in the playoffs can be a pain in the ass too. And Miami is the furthest. Miami and Portland are the two cities that are furthest away from all the other teams. The Heat always log the most travel in the NBA, and this is easy. They go up to Orlando and they play. So I think there are some things working in their favor, and I think they have a firm belief that they handle these situations as well or better than anybody else, and we'll see. But anyway, check out all the other stuff at the 5 Reasons Sports Network, 5reasonsports.com, macainc.net, macainc.net, christophersbakery.com/5 Reasons, spelled out. Get 15% off your order with the code 5 Reasons, and MrMsSubs.com, 5 Reasons, also the code there, and you get 15% off your online order. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to the 5 on the Floor on the 5 Reasons Sports Network.